This presentation comes from the premise that lecturers in all fields, including academic language and learning lecturers, need to connect with their own field in order to teach and research effectively. New understandings and meanings around practice often take place in all units and are reported on, but unless we can widely disseminate this, the potential for collegiality and professionalism will be lost. So this session reports on the outcome of 2 projects that aimed to deal with that, separately funded through all, that have been combined into one single database. So the aims for this meeting, what we want to really do in this meeting is firstly just briefly describe the database for those of you who haven't explored it. Briefly explain how and why it came to be, and explore the merits of extending this database to a broader international context. And of course, assuming there are benefits of widening the database, there are a series of issues that would need to be addressed. For instance, we need to look at the search categories to see if they're still relevant to other contexts and identify any new categories. We'll be talking in a little while about the difficulty of identifying the categories that we do have, but we're anxious to have a look to see whether these categories are appropriate to other all units in other contexts, other parts of the world. We also need to discuss whether the database structure should be replicated or linked to other existing databases, or perhaps redeveloped into a different structure entirely. And of course, if work needs to be done, it needs to be costed and paid for. So we're also searching for perhaps some potential funding ideas. And to achieve all of this, an international working group probably needs to be set up. So we would like to explore the possibility of this and see what interest there is out there. So the big aim for the session is to begin discussion of all of these issues. We've got 2 slides at the end of the presentation that we'd love your comments on. So, the database. Let's have a look at the database. So, and the motivation for the database is really quite simple. First, all advisors need to publish and share our publications. This is really particularly important now that all advisors sometimes find themselves in organisational environments that kind of threaten to deprofessionalise us. So the theoretical basis of our profession really needs to continually develop and strengthen. Of course, publishing also increases our visibility and credibility among discipline educators and leaders in our universities, and let's face it, we need the leaders in our universities to see us, to see what we do, to see what we stand for. And of course, we teach academic writing and often show students how to write a research article. So we should at least be doing it ourselves, we believe. And of course, advancing our practice and benchmarking are also important, and sharing our practice is the only way to do this. In many universities, we work in small teams or even in isolation. So it's important for us as professionals to be able to all connect with our field. So, you know, there's some pretty strong motivations for the development of this database. However, this kind of information isn't always easy to find. Information about our practices, information about our publications. We're in many conference proceedings as well as academic journals, and even in academic journals we find ourselves not only in journals closely related to our work, such as TESOL journals, education journals, etc., higher ed learning and teaching journals, but with increasing disciplinary work, we're published in journals of just about every university discipline. So it's kind of important. We felt it was important to bring all of these publications together, or as many as we can. So now it's over to Bronwyn to talk about the history and the broad categories of the database.
Okay, thanks, Judy. I might just take you back a slide, because we're talking to you about something that many of you will not have actually seen. So I'm just going to take you back to this slide, and down the bottom here is actually the web URL for the database. So after this presentation, if you want to go and have a look at it, please do. But I'll tell you now, as Judy said, the sort of history that went on around producing the database. So it started way back, more than 8 years ago, really. In 2007, we had a ICALL, the Association for Academic Language and Learning, funded project. And we called it Towards Benchmarking. So the idea being that we wanted to know what other universities in Australia were doing in the academic language and learning field. So we started with a project that involved a desktop search initially to see what was being advertised on different universities about the sorts of programs that were being run. We then followed that up by contacting each university and checking with them that we had the right information, and then actually developing through that a series of descriptors of the work that we're all doing. And that went again back to people to see whether they're happy with it. So it was quite a lot of backwards and forwards in checking to make sure that identifying the descriptors of our work was something that people were happy with, the sorts of words we were choosing, because it is a fairly diverse field. So that was, I guess, our first foray into trying to develop the data fields. In 2000, as a result of that, and you'll see that if you go and have a look on the web address, you'll see the old project. We created a sort of a static review of what was going on in Australia in 2007, but you could see most universities, you could click on to different things and see what they were doing and a little bit more detail about it. But it wasn't really a searchable database. We didn't have enough money to do that. It was a very sort of less than $4,000 we did that work. So 2008, Judy actually put in a request for funding. It's a more project funding from ICALL to do a database of the research, whereas we looked primarily at the practices. And Judy was looking, and I'm just going to try this arrow, Judy was looking at the database and the research. The same year, without sort of realising what was going on for a little while, I was also trying to put a project together that looked at creating a database that was updatable and relational. And Judy and I came together at that point and started to join forces because we realised that we should actually be starting to use the same sorts of data fields for each of the projects. And so we revised our separate projects and brought them together 2008, 2009. We again looked at all those data fields that we'd come up with in the early project, and we did another revision. We presented them at the ICALL conference. People wanted further revisions. We went about doing that, and then we went trialling it. And again, finally, 2011, we actually presented it at the ICALL conference, and it's been up and running since then. So that's the history of how things happened. So the idea is that it's actually a relational database, and there's probably a lot of people here that are familiar with that. But what that means is that the practices and the research are searchable by cohorts, learning focus, research related to it. So cohorts and learning focus are there, the fields that are there. We can search the research related to that, and we can also search the practice related to that, and any research coming out of the practice. So those four fields are the key areas that we're looking at in the database. And I'm going to hand it back to Judy now, and I'm going to get rid of my arrow with a bit of luck, and hand it back to Judy now to talk to you about what the categories were that we came up with. And this is an important part because we're not sure whether these will match your ideas about the sorts of work that you're doing or not. And that's one of the things that reasons we want to present this today, so we can share that sort of information a bit more. So Judy, over to you.
Thank you. Okay. We thought at the beginning identifying the practice and research categories and subcategories would be really easy, interesting, but also easy. However, it was really important, a really incredibly difficult task. Initially, we looked at all websites from universities to identify, the subcategories that we could. We discovered an incredible diversity, so we ended up actually with a huge number of subcategories and sub-subcategories. I think we had about up to 5 dot points at one stage, I think, 5 points for each category. So, clearly that wasn't going to work, and we did present it to the OR community, and they concurred with us almost unanimously that it needed to be simplified. So although it kind of really drove us mad, I think this was the most, apart from the technical aspects of developing the database, I think this is the part that drove us most nearly mad, trying to streamline some subcategories where we thought, oh, that subcategory was really important. We didn't want to lose that distinction, but in the end we had to, so, to make it work. So what I'm about to show you is 3 categories or subcategories of each of the areas that we did come up with. And as Bronwyn said, this is what we're really interested to see, whether these categories are appropriate outside of Australia and, in other contexts. So the practice categories, as you can see, even when it's streamlined, all people have developed an incredible array of practices. All advisors have been engaged in all of these practices. I mean, not that we all do all of them, but each of these practices has been done by all advisors in Australia anyway. So it's clear that we don't just run workshops and individual consultations with students. Our work is much busier than that. And even the work that we do directly with students has an increasing online focus, which isn't specifically represented here. So really, that's an amazing set of possibilities for one relatively small sub-branch of an education discipline, I think. So that's the practice categories we've come up with. And of course, we work with a variety of students in our practice. Some Australian universities have a TAFE sector. This is the Australian further education sector, as well as higher ed. And of course, in TAFE-only institutions and further education-only institutions, there are also all advisors, so they needed to be included. We work, of course, with a diverse array of students. With increasing participation in universities comes increasing diversity, and we need to be equipped to deal with each one of those, to work with each one of those areas. Learning focus as well, that's also incredibly diverse. Although not all of us do all of these things, I mean maths and science in particular are not a standard feature of many or of all units, but it's increasing. It certainly happens in our institution at RMIT, particularly maths and statistics. But it is increasing in others. But that's an incredible array of learning foci that we deal with. I think if some disciplinary lecturers looked at this list, they would actually be aghast at the potential work of all practitioners. And as Bronwyn was talking about, we do have 2 sides of the database that talk to each other. So if you click, if you find a practice that you're interested in, for instance, all you need to do is click on that, on all publications, if there's a publication associated with it, and the publication details will appear. The same on the bibliographic side. If you're looking at the bibliography of a particular publication and you want to find out more information about the practice that article is about. All you need to do is click on the label and it will bring you to the practice side. This seems quite simple and it works in a very, very simple way, but actually it took a lot of time and a lot of effort and a lot of energy and a lot of working closely with our lovely techie person to actually achieve this. Another one of those moments, I think, was when we first looked at it and it was working the way we actually wanted it to work. It just took an incredible amount of time to get that working. And now it's over to Bronwyn again.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Judy. Before we go in, what we're going to do now is go a little bit more deeply into what's in the database. But I'm just wondering how everyone's going out there, and if there's anything anybody wanted to jump in with a comment about at this point or a question in terms of what we've said so far.
Silent.
Silent? Is everybody okay? Ah, somebody's typing. Anna's typing.
Oh, very good. Thank you.
You're all okay so far. All right.
Good. Thank you.
Okay, good and alive. That's great to see. Is that Casserly? All right, that's lovely. Okay, we'll keep on then. So, when you get into the database, and we've just done a screen grab of part of the database. So here, for example, if you're interested to know who else in Australia is doing conference hosting, you would find this under the conference hosting, and you'll see that there's a little, we'll show you a bit more about it. You'll get a little, oops, there we go. Here, it's about a conference that was held at the University of Wollongong, critical discussions about social inclusion. So if you clicked on that, you get a lot more information. We'll show you that later. But you'd also find over here that there's a publication that's come out of it. So that's how it starts to connect up with the two sides of the database. If you're looking at who's doing integration or embedding in the disciplines, you'll again come down here and you'll see some of the places where that's happening, and you'll see exactly what. So for example, at Edith Cowan, they were looking at embedding in core international business unit. At Wollongong, it was around integration into a core engineering unit. And you can have a look and see what was going on there. There'll be more information once you hit on one of those things. And you can go and see what's going on. You can also look at who's doing a whole range of things. So who's doing conference hosting, peer mentoring, workshops, blah, blah, blah. And you'll find this example here. Or let me just keep going. And okay, this is, I think, a slide that we thought afterwards should have gone around the other way, the reverse order. But what it's saying is you can search by practice anywhere down here. So it's just a matter of clicking on, like any sort of menu that you get. You can also search by student cohort. So if you want to know who's doing peer mentoring, who's doing it with, let me find my arrow again. Okay, who's doing peer mentoring, who's doing that with mature age students, and who's doing that focusing on academic literacy, for example. You can click on that and see what comes up. Okay. The actual creation of the database entry for anyone wanting to put something in there is fairly straightforward. We were able to develop a really nice manual for the database, which is available on the front page, and it's really pretty self-explanatory. It has some nice diagrams, and all you've got to do is follow it. Judy and I think, have also volunteered over the time to be troubleshooters if anyone's had any problems with that. But the main thing about the database is it requires input. And so that's one of the things I think we probably need to talk about later. So you've got to have the time to actually do it. So there's got to be a motivator for doing that. And at the 2013 AALL conference, we did have a motivator. It was a prize for the university that put the most entries in. So that worked, and it's not all that much to actually get that going. So we might need to think about that a bit more. And I think the very last thing I want to show you is what happens if you wanted to go back to here, one of these, and click on one of these entries about what was going on. You'll also get a PDF readout of that particular practice, and it's got a number of parts in it that we would fill in. So things like, who were your partners in doing this project? What was the support that existed to do that project? And that's a really important part, because one of the things we were keen to avoid when we were doing this database was having it become a sort of a stick rather than a carrot. We wanted to make sure that senior management knew that these things don't happen in a vacuum, and just because one university can achieve it, it's because of particular supports in place. So, for example, in this instance, the integration was able to happen because it was supported by a teaching and learning management plan from the faculty. So they were really keen to have that sort of work going on. We also looked at the strengths of the practice, the weaknesses, and approaches or the theories that were underpinning it, which is again an important part of our work. And what's not here is any changes you would make for the future practice. And again, you get a link to the person's name, so you can talk to them more about what was actually going on. So it stops us having to reinvent the wheel all the time. And then the last section I wanted to show you was what happens once the database is being filled up. There is a section there that is a reporting function, and you can click on that at any one time and get a pie chart to show the sorts of mix of practices that are going on at any one time. So here you're seeing, for example, that workshops, lectures and tutorials were taking up a large percentage of people's time. Strangely enough, conference hosting was as well. Subjects for credit, so people in academic language and learning units teaching subjects for credit was a less of a thing happening. Student consultations were diminishing. This is at a particular moment in time, and it only relates to what's actually in the database, not necessarily what's going on unless people have actually put it in there. And at that point, I just want to say that one of the reasons this has been really helpful for me personally was I used to work at the University of Wollongong, and it was really useful to be able to show senior management the sorts of things that we do. So going back to some of those earlier ideas about, all the practices that are being done, and showing them, for example, this type of thing, where that's all printed out. It could go into the annual report. It was really good to go and give it to senior management. So it was a sort of really useful reporting idea as well. I can see some comments here. So Judy's going to go next about the database entry, but do we want to have a quick look at the comments there, Judy?
Yes. Yeah, Fiona, I agree. It would be great to be used for benchmarking if we get enough data in. But as Bronwyn said, this only represents what's been put into the database. Our key problem has been getting people to put things into the database. And despite the fact that, both Bronwyn and I have offered to do that, if people get, into difficulties, we're very happy to enter it for them. But we need them to send it to us. But ideally, of course, it would be great if everybody could enter their own. As they get a publication published, go straight to the database, enter it into the database. As they develop a new practice, put it in the practice part of the database, so that we have a really good picture of what's happening in all units in Australia at this stage. It would be great if everybody could do that.
Can I
So,
just
yeah,
add,
hopefully
jump in
people
there?
will come up with a few ideas. Sorry, Bronwyn. Hopefully people will come up with a few ideas about how to do that. Fiona has already had an idea that it should be a feature and a prize at all conference. That's a great idea, I think. And Vanessa, yes, this is definitely open to Atlant's members as well. And we have Massey actually in it at the moment. Massey and the University of Fiji are in it because they requested specifically to have their publications and practices added. So that's great. I mean, the whole point of this presentation is, firstly, do we want to extend it beyond Australia / New Zealand? And we feel that does need to be extended. But also, what steps do we take to enable that to happen? So, the big aim is to get some discussion around that. But yes, at the moment, I believe anybody can feed anything into it, I think. We can make it as it is. It can become an international database if people put their information in. That's all we need. Sorry, Bronwyn, were you going to say something before? I think I cut you off.
Quickly, if that's okay. No, just Fiona has asked, has talked about the idea about, and you mentioned it too, Judy. If we got enough data in there, we could use it for benchmarking.
Yes.
And just want to add in there now that in Australia, and it's possibly what's happening overseas as well, there's a national survey that goes out to students. And last year, we managed to get into the survey as a standard reporting element, a thing called Academic Language and Learning Unit. And that's customisable now to whatever that unit is called in your own institution. So, for example, here at Sydney, it's called the Learning Centre. But, Judy, you've got a different name at RMIT.
Yes, we're the Study and Learning Centre. We have study as well.
Yes, well, you do that. So this idea about it being a customisable unit is great. And the fact is that then this is already a benchmarking exercise that is going on in Australian universities every so often. It's a national survey that goes on. But I guess what worries me about that, it's good to have it in there, but at the same time, I think we need to have our own much more drilled down benchmarking. And again, this database could be used for that, because the national survey relies on the students who are surveyed having actually had some connection with that centre, that it's the Academic Language and Learning Centre in the university. So, for example, at Sydney, we've got 50,000 students, a lot of students, and there are not that many of us working in the Learning Centre, although we're just about expanding with 2 more staff, which is miraculous. But even so, it's quite likely that a large percentage of students don't actually get to us. And so I'm just thinking that it's good to have both of these things running. Yes, it's great about the actual survey, and I think the benchmarking gives us extra depth and richness to what we're actually doing. And at that point, I'll stop. And I can see Margaret and Rowena talking about that survey, and yes, we can send information about that. It's not run by us. It's a university survey run by the federal government, I'm assuming.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. Sorry, I'll stop talking now, Judy.
Okay.
But Joanne's typing, so we might want to just see.
Okay. Yep. Just go back to that.
Yeah.
And Cassidy had a question, do we need to be logged into the all site to make entries? You do, you need to get into the site, but do you need, I actually forgotten whether we made it password protected or not. I don't think we did.
We didn't.
No, certainly we didn't to look at the database, to use the database. I'm sure it's not password protected to enter as well.
Yeah, if
am I wrong there? I've forgotten.
You've got to log on to the ICALL site to make an entry, and that way it stops bots from coming in and ruining the actual entries. But
that's right.
you just have to, it's easy enough to log on to the ICALL site and get yourself logged on. On the home page, there's something that'll tell you how to do that.
Yes, thanks, Fiona.
Yeah, it's a good point, Joanne, that thing about, yeah, exactly. The whole thing about when you're embedded, they don't even know that they're actually getting academic language and learning support. That's such a good point. Very good point. Yeah. And Fiona said, yeah, easy career login. Okay, all good. So, sorry,
Right.
Judy, off you go. Sorry.
No, you're right. No. So Bronwyn has just shown you what the practice side of the database looks like. I've just got a couple of slides here to show you what the bibliographic side is. You might just want to browse through. If that's the case, this is the page on the left. I'm going to see if I can pick up the arrow. This page on the left here is the one that will come up by clicking publication title or title of the journal or the year of publication. You can flip between inverse chronological and chronological order if you just want to browse. If you find something that you like the look of, a publication title, for instance, all you do is click on it, and this is what you'll come up with, this page here. So just the abstract. We don't have the full articles in it, but we do tell you how to get it. And we usually have contact details if the writer is happy to put their email address in. If they're not, that's okay, but we at least have the title of the journal or book or whatever. So bibliographic details to enable you to get a copy of it if you need it, if you want it, I should say. If you want to search, however, you can search under any or all of these search areas. So you can search under a particular practice, an institution, cohort, etc., etc. You might just want to find out, have a list of the copious publications of Kate Channock, for instance, or anybody else. So that's easy enough to do by just typing in her name there. If you know the title of the publication, of course, you can do likewise. And, you know, you might just want to search for student cohort, or you might want to search for a particular student cohort and a particular practice or a particular learning focus. So any or all of those, it's quite flexible. And creating a bibliographic entry is actually also quite easy. And as Bronwyn said, we have a really good user manual to help you to do that. It has screenshots. It's absolutely clear. So, you know, if you have publications, if you have practices that aren't here, please think about putting them up. It would be really great. So what now? It's really, I think Bron was going to do this, but I'll keep going if you like, sorry. We really want to explore what the benefits might be of extending this to an international context. And of course, if we do that, we need to identify what changes we need to make and whether the database in its current structure would be suitable or whether it needs to be replicated or redeveloped, perhaps. And as we mentioned before, this is not going to happen by a few people working on their weekends. So we do need a bit of funding for it. And I guess the best way to do this is to establish an ongoing international working group. So the next two slides we've got have questions related to these issues. And we thought it might be a good idea to just put the first slide on first and perhaps have some discussions and comments around that and then move to the next one. Thanks, Bronwyn. Okay.
Sorry, that was just me because my screen grayed over because I didn't mean to hit it.
Oh, well, that's okay. But
I was just trying to get it going again.
Perfectly timed.
Yeah.
So the first slide of discussion points, are the data fields relevant to your work? Now, running a webinar it is a little bit different to running a face-to-face workshop. Of course, if it was a face-to-face workshop, we'd have handouts with all those data fields written on them. And we can't do that for you, but we can put those earlier slides up. And perhaps you might want to have a discussion about each of the sections, each of the categories. Then perhaps we could move on to the benefits of extending it. Is there an interest in doing this? People in Canada, people in UK, other people in New Zealand, would you be interested in extending this database to an international context? And of course, then we would need to look at what changes might be needed. So, this is a lot to ask, and this is only one PowerPoint of a slide of questions. There's another one coming, and we have very little time left. But perhaps we could just make a start. So, would it help if we put one of the slides about that lists the data fields up to everybody? Do you think? 2 people are typing. Yes, okay. So, perhaps, oops, sorry, too quick. Perhaps the practice categories to start with. So, perhaps we could have some discussion about, ask yourself in your context, are these practice and research subcategories appropriate? Are they things that you do, but more importantly, perhaps, are there other categories, other practices you engage in that aren't listed here? Good. A few people are typing, great.
Writing groups. Yeah.
Yes, excellent.
Yeah. That's very true. Writing groups is missing.
Yes.
Oh,
yes. Sorry, I should have explained. Where are we?
Pass and PAL is peer mentoring.
Yes.
Just to Michael's, just ask Pass and PAL. So if we come back down to this one, peer mentoring. Peer mentoring, a lot of what goes on in Australia is based on supplemental instruction, and we've just called it peer mentoring for want of a, for a more generic term. Peer tutoring often involves students working with other students, not the same as a supplementary instruction model, and there could be some money exchanged. But I think what's happened here is that, Michael, you've picked up something that's really important, and something that Judy and I have always wanted to do and never done it. We wanted to do a glossary of these terms. Yes. And yes, Maori or Pacifica students. And I guess what we've done here, that's sort of can I just go quickly whip over?
Cohorts? Yeah.
Cohorts. So we've got Indigenous students here as a fairly broad-based. Normally we'd say Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students. Oh, wow. Managing, coordinating third-party services. Yes.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
I should have thought of that. We have smart thinking.
Yeah. Oh, lots of people are writing now.
Yes, Martin, it is pretty comprehensive, but it was even more comprehensive when we started. This is a result of quite substantial collapsing of subcategories into subcategories.
Yeah, that's really good point about what's domestic for one group and international for another.
Exactly.
We'd have to have something like, some way of distinguishing those for different country groups. Yeah.
Yes. Yes, Fiona.
Yes, need. Yes, need the glossary.
There we go. Okay, Bronwyn and I. Okay. In fact, we would really need that quite quickly if we're going to extend this into an international context. We really, and in fact, we kind of needed it even for our own context.
Yeah,
In the student cohort list, for instance, there's foundation students. Well, we have two kinds of foundation students at our MIT. We used to. We used to run some foundation courses, which were part of first year courses, credit bearing courses that the all teachers taught. But we also have foundation studies, which is, sort of an Alicos type program, but run slightly differently. There are, it tends to be a little bit more discipline specific. So, this is an issue because the universities run slightly differently, even within Australia. We're going to find, quite a few differences there, but of course we're going to find many, many more differences once we look at it in an international context. Thanks, Rowena.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, Michael, I think that's what one of the things we're hoping that we're trying to get to, that we do fund it internationally, and that that would be great.
It
So
would.
bits from everybody, maybe if we could.
Yes.
Oh,
Oh, Anna, yes, you can. You can combine subcategories. Oh, no, actually you can't, but you've got to just do, you can combine the areas, but you can't combine from the same list. We did explore the possibility of doing that, but the way the database is structured doesn't allow it. Is that right, Bronwyn? I think I'm right.
yeah, it's within each of these, like the one you're looking at now. They're all separate subcategories, and they only relate to something in one of the other subcategories. So they can, the cohorts, for example, the learning focus. So if we go back to oops, sorry.
Next one.
These are the way you can go across, but you can't go within easily,
Yeah.
or at all. But maybe that's something we should think about.
Yes. Yeah.
Sorry, Judy, I'll just put you back to where
No,
you
you're
were.
right. What is TAFE? TAFE, Michael, is the Australian Further Education Area. Technical and Further Education, it stands for. And many universities have TAFE components. RMIT used to have a TAFE component, but it's actually technically not TAFE, but we do have a vocational education component that runs the same courses as other TAFE institutions. The general area of further education is called VET, vocational education.
Yeah, it's true, Rowena. When we first got it going, we had the 2007 one, which was a really foot slogging project. We had something like 34 out of the 37 public universities represented, but that was because we had Joanne Dearlove and me actually ringing and hassling people to do it. But yeah, we need something to get everyone in there that's not yet a critical mass.
Mm.
Yep. So Anna's just actually come in with a message, and Judy and I went to the European Association of Teaching Academic Writing last year, and we did this similar presentation. And there was one person in the US who was actually starting up doing some work on it, so he's sort of interested. And there was also somebody in the UK. Name is just totally gone. Can you remember that, Judy? The woman from the UK.
It wasn't Lisa, was it, from Coventry? No?
Lisa, that's it. Who was
Can't
just
remember her
starting.
last
She had
name,
a
but yes.
Gabansky Williams. Gabansky
Oh,
Williams. Lisa.
yeah, something
Um,
like that. Yes.
yeah, and so Lisa just had some. It was at the very early stages. She had funding from the literary fund to do something. So she was
Yes.
very early on.
Yes. So there are sort of pockets of interest out there.
So should we move now to the next bit about, just wondering, I mean, it looks like
Yes.
people are sort of pretty well thinking, yeah, it's a good idea and there's some things that are missing and
Yep.
um, the
And
next
some
part was,
good points. Yeah.
yeah,
So do we want to go to the next slide then? The last one. That's our last slide. Or do we? I guess we can't really talk about the database until people have had a chance to look at it.
yeah.
What's the time? We do have a few more moments left. Is there anything else here that we could discuss? I suppose benefits might be a bit obvious, unless people can come up with some benefits that we haven't thought of. Yeah. So perhaps we just move to the last slide then. And perhaps the second and third question there, potential funding sources. Well, I guess we've sort of dealt a bit with that too. I like the idea of the sorry, all and the other organisations, perhaps getting some funding from them. But of course, there would have to be enough people who thought this was a useful idea for that to happen. So I guess how do we get to that stage is the next question we really need to ask.
Well, Michael's just typed
Sorry, go
in
on.
something which, Michael's just typed in a plan.
In February.
And look into funding and organising a working group. And
Excellent.
Judy and I love doing this, don't we? We do, actually. We seriously do. We got to be good friends over this.
We did. We didn't know
Thousand
each other
kilometres
until
away
this.
from each other.
That's right. I think that's a great idea, Michael. We kind of need something to get the ball rolling. You know, we've promoted this we've promoted it within the All community. We've promoted it within the European Association of Teaching Academic Writing community, and now we're promoting it in this community. So, you know, I think it would be really good if we could sort of start taking the bull by the horns, as they say, and sort of move on. And start working out how we get this to happen. So I think that's a really good suggestion, Michael and Rowena. Nobody else typing? Oh, yes. Volunteers, yes.
I think, probably just a couple from each, maybe a small group, a couple's probably only two, but a slightly bigger group from each national grouping would be great. Now that we're all good on Adobe Connect, we'll be fabulous.
We'll be fine. Yep, that's right. No more flying.
No more flying. Although Judy and I are actually available if you want us to come over and visit you in Canada or New Zealand or the UK, that's all good.
Okay,
yeah, that's
Vanessa.
a good idea.
Yes.
Good idea. Minus 25. Whoa.
So perhaps if each of the associations could email their members and look for expressions of interest, might be a useful thing to do. Yes, 27 is much better. Plus 27.
So Judy, I think we have to stop in about 4 minutes, don't we?
I think we do. Yes, there's multiple attendees typing at the moment, so I'll just see if we can get to the end. Oh, great. Thanks, Martin. And thanks, Rowena.
Yeah.
And Margaret.
Excellent. So
Yeah.
we're aware that we're getting towards the end, but
Great, Michael. That's perfect. I like step-by-step instructions.
yeah, good idea. Yeah. Yeah, look, it's been really good doing it. Thank you, everybody.
Yep. Yes. Thanks for the opportunity. It's been a fantastic. It's been fantastic to be able to have that opportunity to talk about our pet project again.
Yeah, we love it.
We don't want it to sort of languish, but
No, we want to just give it a new injection of enthusiasm, and we'd be really happy to do that. Thank you, everybody. It's been great. Thank you.
Thanks heaps. Thanks.
See you.
Bye.
Bye.